solid bait fish. You go up the lake and the water get a little bit cooler and you don't see as much bait, but just a little bit of bait here in these pockets, a little bit of bait there, and catch way more fish. So just as long as there's a presence of bait, it doesn't have to be like I'm looking for the most bait in the whole lake. You just want there to be some presence. So don't take that as though you need to be where all the bait in the lake is congregated. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the technique of the month for December. Moving along and right here at the end of the year, get ready for Christmas time, all that fun stuff. I'm sure we already have our Christmas decorations up at my house. It's typically right after, sometimes even before Thanksgiving technically. We get our tree pretty early in December, but yeah, Christmas time is upon us, and this can still be a great time of the year to catch a lot of fish. It can be a really productive time, honestly, depending on the body of water that you're fishing and the conditions. Catching the right set of conditions can really make December go from a mediocre time to fish to a really good one. And that, again, that varies. I mean, it's different in Florida than it is in Tennessee, or that it is in Georgia or Alabama or anywhere else. So yeah, but conditions, playing the right conditions and catching that right week of the year can be really good fishing in December. The topic for this month really kind of similar to what we talked about back in October, and that's a pretty good theme for a lot of the year, honestly, is fishing around the bait fish or just finding the bait. It's such a big deal in this late in the year. Those fish are starting to move into their winter places where they're going to hang out for the winter, and that's always going to revolve in some way around bait fish. So those fish that are trying to find a place where they're going to set up for the winter definitely will revolve around bait. So having some baits and fishing in a way to where you're trying to imitate bait fish largely, but fishing in those places where you expect those fish to have congregated for the winter. When I think about that, it looks different in a lot of different places. I think of one river system, honestly, that I like to fish a lot. We fish up right below a dam. I mean, it's pretty heavy current and it's pretty shallow water, but the bait fish are there, and we catch a lot of fish, a lot of smallmouth, right below that dam, largely on a little swim bait. A little 2.8 bass. This is a Bass Pro of the Max Action Speed Shad. Man, just a little small swim bait. Something small on a small jig head, usually an 1/8 ounce, 3/16 ounce, something like that. Does really well. But we're fishing 3 feet deep, right below a dam, and trying to find places that are tucked in out of that current. So it can look a lot different on one end of a fishery than it does on the other. So really just keeping that in mind, but finding those places where that bait fish is and where that bait fish is set up in a way that those fish can ambush them and can take advantage of how those bait fish are. So for me personally, I prefer to do that shallow. I would much rather fish shallow, fish around cover, fish around targets, is how I like to do that. So I'm going to look for places where I've got a presence of bait fish, and it's not like it is so much so back in the fall where you're going to see that on top of the water. You're going to be using your electronics and looking down under the water to try to find that bait fish. And down on the bottom end of the lake, that may look like more out in the guts and then in the bottoms of those ditches and those valleys. I know we did one a few years ago, a technique of the month, talking about fishing the ditches and fishing the valleys. That happens a lot this time of the year, in December, especially once you've had several cool fronts and that water starts getting down into the 50s and certainly colder from there. That's when you really start seeing those fish congregate around that bait out a lot deeper, and that's when you'll see that. And something like that little swim bait, if I'm fishing down in those kind of places, it's probably going to be on a heavier head, a quarter, 5/16, maybe even a 3/8 ounce head, is what I'm gonna need to get that little swim bait down, or certainly little minnow style baits. But if I'm able to get a jerk bait to those fish, that's something that I really like because I'm able to fish that bait at a, you know, at an erratic retrieve. I can stop that bait, pause it, just let it suspend and hang there in front of those fish, and then work it away from them again. This particular one is the new Maverick PXR. It's the deep version. This thing will run 10 or 11, maybe even 12 feet deep on a really good long cast. So the nice thing with that, not only will it get that deep if you need to get all the depth out of it, but if you're only trying to get that bait 6 or 8 feet deep, you can do that with a pretty short cast. And using forward-facing sonar, you're able to, you know, you see that fish at 60 or 70 feet, where you're not going to make a cast out there at 100, 150 feet and then get a bait just barely down to it. But you can throw 20 or 30 feet beyond that fish and get this bait, you know, 5, 6, 7 feet deep really, really quickly. So that's the nice thing about a deep diving jerk bait when you combine it with forward-facing sonars, is just how quick that bait will get deep versus taking the whole length of the cast to get 5 or 6 feet out of it. But again, this time of the year, depending on the you know, the system that you're fishing in, it can look like a lot of different things, but it is so geared around bait. If you're not seeing some bait fish in December, getting this late in the year, you're probably not in a really productive area. One thing that I will say about that, though, I have seen times, I can particularly think of over on Douglas, fishing some in those Black Friday tournaments and stuff right at the beginning, you know, right before December. And man, you could go down the lake and just be rafts of bait, just, you know, across the river channel, across the creek channel, whatever, just solid bait fish. You go up the lake and the water get a little bit cooler and you don't see as much bait, but just a little bit of bait here in these pockets, a little bit of bait there, and catch way more fish. You know, so just as long as there's a presence of bait, it doesn't have to be like I'm looking for the most bait in the whole lake. You just want there to be some presence. So don't take that as though you need to be where, you know, all the bait in the lake is congregated. There just needs to be some, okay? So just keep that in mind. You don't have to see enough to sink the boat, but you do need to be around some. It's really important. And that, you know, sometimes that I've done good fishing like that this time of the year, especially throwing a small crankbait up shallow. Sometimes it's not actually even the little thread fin that I'm seeing so much. It'll just be a few big gizzard shad here and there. You know, so you're looking for any type of bait, any type of sign of life is enough to tell you that, hey, there's some bait around. There's a good chance that there'll be some bass around these areas too. So yeah, definitely keep that in mind. But yeah, find the bait this time of the year. If you find the bait, you're going to be around some fish, and then just try to find the conditions that match the way you want to catch them. Throw you a little swim bait, throw you a little jerk bait, maybe mix you in a shad wrap. You'll probably be just fine. Couple things, couple setups here to wrap it up with. For that little swim bait, I like to fish it on that Johnny Moore's carbon light. That's a 6.9 medium light action. I like that rod for it a lot of times. Sometimes I will step up to the 7.2, but I do like that carbon light setup because of the reel. The matching carbon light reel is a little bit faster than the platinum reel. This is like a 6.2 to 1. I think that platinum is a 6 to 1. I do that on 10-pound XPS braid, and usually a 10-pound test XPS fluorocarbon leader. If the water is really clear, sometimes I'll drop down to 8. But then that's the VMC, the little tungsten red line jig head, excellent jig head. That Bass Pro Max Action Speed Shad. That's the 2.8 inch one. The regular Speed Shad, the 3 inch, is a go-to for me as well. It's a little bit smaller profile, and I've caught so many fish on both of those baits, honestly. For the jerk bait, for that Maverick, whether it's the deep one or the regular, throwing that on a carbon light 6.6 medium action. We've got that platinum 6.8 to 1 gear ratio reel on there, and 12-pound test XPS fluorocarbon gets the nod for that. If I need to get this as much depth as possible, I will drop down to 10 if I'm in open water. But that is a really good setup for fishing a jerkbait on. So yeah, get out there this month. Make sure that you stay safe. Wear your Onyx inflatable life jacket. You know, you're going to be layered up this time of the year. That Onyx inflatable is really comfortable, and man, you can fish in it just perfectly fine. I know I do a lot, especially in these cooler months. Just stay safe. Keep that Onyx inflatable on, and you'll have you a good day out there on the water. We'll catch you on the next one.